So let's start talking about the zone zero location. The zone zero location is where the nozzle goes into the nozzle boot. Now the nozzle boot is this area right here. Now you can see the little square with the red around it, the little red zone around it. That indicates that that's a zone zero location. Okay, now zone zero simply means if we don't have to put wiring there, we don't. Now, if we absolutely had to, we could. But the nozzle boot is really where your nozzle, which is this guy, hangs up. That's where the gasoline nozzle kind of holds itself while it's not in use. And again, that is a zone zero. If we absolutely had to put any kind of equipment in the hazardous location that's classified as a zone zero, it has to be deemed intrinsically safe. Intrinsically safe uses methods that prevent a spark from ever happening. It's expensive, and that's why, as a general rule, we call it a no-fly zone, in essence meaning if we don't have to put equipment there, we don't. The other method that we can use in a zone zero location is not just intrinsically safe, but we can actually use the equipment protection level through encapsulation. And encapsulation in the Canadian Electrical Code has kind of an acronym. It's MA, and MA is the designation for encapsulation. So equipment in a zone zero can be encapsulated. It also has to provide the equipment protection level GA. Okay, this is the highest IEC level of protection that you can get, and again it's called GA. So when you go to buy equipment, it has to have the designation GA on it in order to install in a zone zero location. So let's now start to take a look at what happens inside the pump. It's important to note that inside the pump, of course, there is a barrier, and that barrier actually is usually some sort of a vapor type barrier, and it's usually somewhere in here. And so when we look at how the zones kind of shape up here, it's important to note that below that vapor barrier is considered a zone 1 location. And above that vapor barrier, it's considered a zone 2 location. Now, often it isn't necessarily just a vapor barrier. It may be a non-physical barrier. It also may be some sort of an enclosure that you actually have to remove to get your wiring in. But all the same, that's how the zones break out. Now, that zone 1 location, when we look at a top view, which is what we're looking at here, this is kind of a top view of the pump. And that top view is going to tell us how far inside the pump now, that's what we're looking at, is inside the pump, where that barrier is separating the zone 1 from the zone 2. Your zone, your zone 2 location is right here. And that zone 2 is next to a zone 1 location, which is 450 millimeters towards the inside. So the first 450 millimeters towards the center inside of that pump is a zone 1 location. The very center core of it is a zone 2. Now let's take a look at outside the pump. Of course, below that barrier that we were talking about, what I've done is I've kind of taken a bit of a screenshot here of what it would look like above outside the pump. And so we have to consider that when we look outside the pump, there's a 450 millimeter area that is considered, of course, from the barrier down, is considered to be zone 1. And that, of course, is from that barrier down. That's that zone 1 location, 450 mil outside of that pump. Now, outside the pumps, of course, we have to consider that there's also a hazardous location, and it's a zone 2 location that's 450 mil above grade. So 450 millimeters above grade, and that extends outwards 6 meters in either direction. That is considered a zone 2 location. Now that actually means it affects, of course, our light standards in this case. So any light standards or kiosks or anything in that area are considered to have a hazardous location. And so you'll have to make sure that you, of course, pull in the correct wire, tech, or some sort of cable that is considered to be suitable for hazardous locations. Any pits or depressions below grade. So often what you'll have is you'll have an area where you bring your conduits up into the pump. That area is actually considered a zone 1 location. So basically anything underneath your pumps is a zone 1, so you'd have to wire accordingly. Now let's take a look at the gasoline storage tank. This one's fairly simple. When we look at where our hazardous locations are, there is a 900 millimeter spherical area around the discharge pipe, and that is zone 1. Then what we do is anywhere between 900 mil and 1.5 mil, so we look at this guy here, so that distance here, which is again 900 millimeter to 1.5 meters, is a zone 2 location. In line with Rule 20004 number 7, we also know that because we have a place where we fill, this is our fill pipe here, that whole area in here is classified as a zone 2 location, and that extends 3 meters either direction and upwards of 450 millimeters from that fill pipe. And with that, that concludes the lesson on service stations where we fill up with gas, and of course that also included where the tankers come in and drop off their fuel. So happy installing.